Hello everyone. So, as you guys might know, about a month ago, almost exactly a month ago, I made my final predictions for this year's 2022's midterm elections. And now, this is the video 1 month later after the conclusion of the Georgia Senate runoff, which is the last Senate election, actually the last election overall in this midterm election cycle. Last night it was decided. So now with all races all decided, I think it might be good to look back at my predictions I made a month ago, the day 2 days before election day, and see what we got right and what we got wrong. But this election cycle really shocked me, like really. So I made this video explaining like each Senate race and each governor's race, but we are just gonna look at the website that I put up, which has the same information as the video, like map-wise. Let's first take a look at the Senate map, which I got really wrong. I was 3 seats off, and the Democrats really surprised me this midterm election cycle. Like, they really overperformed. If you look at previous midterms, like if you look at, let's say, 2014, you can see Barack Obama is Obama's second midterm. People were really not really getting tired of the president at this point, and as you can see, the Republicans gained 9 seats in the Senate and 13 seats in the House. If you look at the 2010 midterms, you can see the Republicans really made a lot of gains. 6 seats in the Senate, 63 seats in the House. If you look at the 2018 midterms, you can see in 2018 the Republicans actually gained two Senate seats, but only because this is a very unfavorable map for Democrats. But Democrats did at the same time gain 41 seats in the House. So if you look at this year's midterms, it is very unusual. Due to a combination of factors, I would say, the Democrats really, as I said, outperformed themselves. They gained a seat in the Senate. They barely lost any seats in the House at all. They only lost 9 seats, and if they didn't have such a narrow majority to start with, they could have even kept the House. And they gained 2 governorships. So, what caused the Democratic overperformance? So, as we know, the polls, right after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, so abortion rights gone, we can start to see the Democrats' chances in these pundit websites start to rise up, steadily rising up. But as election day approached, we thought it might just be a polling mirage, and the Republicans did end up pulling ahead in the end, towards election day. So we just thought this polling during the summer was just like a mirage, like it's just an illusion. Right after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and stuff, the public opinion would naturally shift towards the Democrats, but as time goes on, voters simply don't care anymore, so that's where the Republicans overtook the Democrats' polling lead in the end, near election day. Or that's at least what we thought. Turns out the predictions during the summer, right after Roe v. Wade was overturned, with Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, you can see the polling at this point is actually fairly accurate, at least compared to the election results we actually saw. So that is certainly very interesting. But yeah, the Republican Party nominated more extreme candidates, and as the Democratic voter base were riled up by the issue of abortion rights, and to a lesser extent, gun control, the Democrats really outperformed themselves. Yeah, not to mention, as I said, Republicans had trashy candidates. Like, I can't even like fathom like a bunch of like dudes sitting in a room and they're just going like, who should we nominate for the Pennsylvania Senate race? Dr. Oz, of course, the TV show host. Similarly, in Georgia, they also had terrible candidates. In Georgia, again, a bunch of people just sitting in a room. Who should we run for Senate in Georgia? There are so many great candidates out there. No, Herschel Walker. Let's make Herschel Walker a person with absolutely zero political experience. He might have experience on the football field, but he definitely does not have any experience in the politics field. And then they just went like, yeah, Herschel Walker, he played in Georgia when he was in college, not even the NFL. He played college football in Georgia. And they're like, yeah, even though he lives in Texas, let's run Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker, the Senate candidate. It's just so insanely, like, dumb and stupid that sometimes it's, like, for example, in Pennsylvania and Georgia, it's no wonder that the Democrats actually overperform. But candidate quality does matter, but other issues such as gun control and, most importantly, abortion definitely plays a factor. But still, as you can see, Republicans narrowly gain control of the House by 9 seats because, after all, Joe Biden is still unpopular. His approval rating is like 12 points underwater right now. And the economy is not doing good right now. Inflation's at its highest in like several decades, and the gas prices are still not going down. Which definitely also helps Republicans. I mean, the Republicans did win the popular vote for the House. But let's get back to our predictions and see how well we did. In the Senate, Washington and Colorado, we did predict them correctly. But wait, actually, let's go over to the chart. So I made this chart that basically state is the first column, and then winner, and by how much. The predicted margin, by my definitions, tilt margin is anything less than 1% of margin of victory. A lean margin is anywhere between 1 to 5% margin of victory. A likely margin is anywhere between 5 and 10%, and a safe margin is a margin of victory that's over 10 percentage points. So, and then the bias. So predicted margins, then actual margins, and this column shows you the margin, by how much it's biased towards a specific party. And the bias for chart is just a number that I use so I can put it so the chart can understand it. And then whether it's correct or not. As you can see, I got most of them correct, but Georgia, it was wrong. As you can see, Herschel Walker did not end up winning. Nevada, it was wrong. Adam Laxalt did not end up winning. And Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz, did not end up winning. So these three are wrong, but in a lot of the other races, we got the winner right, but the margin was a bit wrong. For example, in Colorado, we've always known that the Democrats don't get reelected, but by how much? So a likely margin, since Colorado's before 2020 is essentially a blue-leaning swing state, like a swing state with a blue hue. Hillary Clinton won there by 4 points, 5 points. It's only natural, and Michael Bennett barely won his last election. He has actually never won a Senate election with a majority of the vote. But so it's only natural to assume that it's a likely the margin wouldn't be that big, but we are wrong. I was wrong, to be more exact. Michael Bennet won his re-election bid by 15 points, which is a bias towards Republicans. Like, we've always known that Michael Bennet is going to win, but I did not expect him to win by 15 points. That is pretty crazy. Okay, not to mention in Arizona, because my lean margin is a bit like wide, like it's anywhere between 1 to 5%, I predicted to be a lean, but not like by almost a likely margin. I thought Mark Kelly, based on the polls where he was leading by like on average 1 point, he only won in 2020 by around 2 points. But here Mark Kelly beat his Republican opponent, venture capitalist Blake Masters, by almost 5 points, which is a bit wider than I expected. It's not that surprising really, but it's still a bit wider than I expected to be. Almost 5-point margin. In Florida is really like one of the few places in this midterms where the Republicans actually did well. The Republicans really like held on to all of their statewide elected positions and picked up like 4 House races. Like Florida really is one of the few places where Republicans actually did well. So instead of being a likely Republican margin, it's actually a safe Republican margin. Marco Rubio won his re-election bid by 16 points. A margin that is, yeah, a bit big for a state that we traditionally consider to be a swing state. So maybe Florida, starting from now on, is no longer a swing state. It's a red state. But yeah, in Georgia, again, a state where I did not predict the wrong winner. All of the polls after the October surprise of Herschel Walker being revealed of like paying for people's abortions and having secret kids, Raphael Warnock started to gain in the polls, but it was erased pretty quickly if you take a look at the polls. But yeah, these wrong predictions in favor of the Republicans is really just an indication that the Republicans' red wave absolutely went nowhere. Okay. Can see, yeah. So before it was Warnock leading, then Walker leading. It was like they were like crossing each other's polling average. So it's really like a mixed bag, and this is October when it was revealed that Herschel Walker paid for abortions despite being pro-life. So you can see Warnock started to tick up a bit, but on election day, yeah, Walker is leading by a pretty significant margin on election day. So I put it as tilt R because I did see the possibility of Raphael Warnock still winning the runoff, but yeah, Raphael Warnock actually won his re-election bid by 2.8 points, which is an improvement from his 2-point margin in the 2020 runoff. Honestly, like, Raphael Warnock just an incredible candidate. He's won like 4 separate elections in the last 2 years just to get a full term in the Senate. So yeah, he's a really good campaigner. His ads are really good if you watch them. So yeah, still biased towards the Republicans. And then it's just a bunch of solid states that we all know who it's going to. In Nevada though, and if you watched my previous video, right, this one, and you saw the Nevada Senate, you can see in the end, Adam Laxalt is leading by 3.4 points. All of the polls, except for maybe a very select few, shows him leading by like 2, 5, 6 points. Cortez Masto ended up winning by around a bit less than a point. I was not expecting that. Also, ignore the fan noise. I really need to get a newer newer MacBook. But yeah, Cortez Masto, despite the poll saying that she's gonna lose by more than 3 points, she ended up winning by a bit less than a point. So as you can see, why did I predict so many of these wrong? Well, it's the polls. So in 2016, the polls were heavily biased towards the Democrats. They overestimated the Democrats a lot in 2016. Actually, a lot is an understatement. And in 2020, we also saw that the polls were pretty biased towards the Democrats, aka underestimating Republicans, also by a pretty significant margin. So why should this year be an exception? I thought. That's why most of the races of my predictions are biased towards the Republicans, because like these polling averages already show Republicans leading by a pretty significant margin. And if it's anything like 2016 or 2020, and the polls are biased towards the Democrats, then the Republicans are gonna really have a red wave. That did not happen because of an unexpectedly high turnout. Like the Democrats ended up overperforming their polling averages, and the polls this year ended up overestimating Republicans, which caused like things like this to happen. Also in New Hampshire, Maggie Hayes in 2016, she won her election in 2016 by 1,000 votes, I think. That's not a lot. And even though she was definitely favored to win, in the end, the polling averages started to close. Don Bolduc started to close the gap, but in the end, Maggie Hasten still won her re-election by 9.1%. Definitely bigger than expected. Now, in New York, it's safety, but it's still a bit narrow. Like, Chuck Schumer should not be winning his re-election bid by only 12 points. Like, New York, alongside with Florida, is also, one of the few places that the Republicans actually done well in. North Carolina likely ended up being a lean Republican margin. Ted Budd won by around 3 percentage points. Not the overestimation of Republicans in the polls is not quite enough to offset North Carolina's Republican lean, but still, it's overperformance for Democrats. In Ohio, Ohio. J.D. Vance saying he doesn't even care about the war in Ukraine. Most sane political candidate in Ohio. But yeah, this one is pretty accurate. It's a bit tighter than the Republicans would be comfortable with, but 6.5 points, not really an overestimation. In Pennsylvania, though, John Fetterman was leading in the summer polls by 8 points, 9 points, even double digits. We all know that John Fetterman isn't going to win by that much. But in the end, Dr. Oz closed the gap. After the disastrous debate, Dr. Oz on election day had a lead of 0.1%. John Fetterman ended up overperforming that by 5 points. John Fetterman won the election comfortably by almost 5 percentage points. Again, if Dr. Oz, in the end, in Pennsylvania, the state where the polls often overestimate Democratic support, shows Dr. Oz is leading slightly, then Dr. Oz is going to win. If past patterns are to be trusted, but no. John Fetterman did end up winning, and by not a small margin. Washington. In the end, we thought it's going to narrow up for a bit. The polls show the race narrowing up. In the end, it went nowhere. Patty Murray won her re-election bid by 15 points. Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, on election day, was leading by around 3 points in the polls. He ended up winning by 1, which is, again, the overestimation of Republicans, not quite enough for Mandela Barnes to unseat Ron Johnson, but yeah, still, his margin's pretty narrow. So as you can see, Democrats gained a seat in a supposedly red wave year. Democrats gained. They gained a seat in a supposedly red wave year, which is like, yeah, a pretty good indication of how well the quote-unquote red wave went. But yeah, if we look at the average bias right here, the average bias for all of the races combined is around half a point towards the Republicans, aka overestimating the Republicans by around half a point. But in competitive races, which is anything that has a predicted margin of not safe, so likely R's, likely D's all count. There are 10 races of that kind, and in those races, the bias is a bit bigger at more than 1.5 points overestimation of Republicans. 91% are correct, but if you only look at competitive races, which I'm sorry, there wasn't 10, there's 11 of them, only 72% of them were predicted correctly by me. Yeah. So I try to like overestimate the Republicans as much as possible when making it, because the polls always overestimate Democrats. To offset that, I always add a bit of Republican support to the polls, but yeah, it did not go very well. Here's a chart. If the state is on the left, and if the bar is going towards the right, it means overestimation of Democrats. If the bar is going towards the left, it means overestimation of Republicans. As you can see, really only in Florida were the Democrats overestimated and the Republicans underestimated. Really shocked by how Marco Antonio Rubio won his re-election in Florida by 16.5 points. Like, yeah, Florida maybe no longer a swing state. But in other races, Colorado, Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, all overestimation of Republicans, all underestimating Democrats, which is really shocking, like, at least for the predictions, because all the predictions, again, they used to favor Democrats, like overestimate Democrats. This year, exact opposite. You can see the same thing in the governor's races. You can see in Alaska, Mike Dunleavy faced a closer race for re-election than expected. Mike Dunleavy was re-elected with 50.3% of the vote. Again, yeah. But the biggest thing is in Arizona. If you look at the Arizona governor polls leading up to the election, Katie Hobbs refused to debate Kari Lake, and we still don't know why. But Kari Lake, again, leading by 3.5 points on election day. And then guess what happened? Katie Hobbs won. Kari Lake still being a crybaby. She still not conceding the race, but we the sane people all know that Katie Hobbs did win, albeit very, very narrowly. She still won. Despite the polls showing her underwater by almost 4 points, Katie Hobbs, yeah, managed to pull off a victory. In some of these, and there was this recent controversy with a county, Cochise County, not certifying their votes, but that's not a focus of this video. In Connecticut, in a lot of the New England and Mid-Atlantic states, there were a lot of governor's races that I characterize as likely, because, like, even though they're pretty blue on the presidential level, on the governor's level, they kind of narrow up a little bit. But in Connecticut, likely D is actually a safe Democratic margin. In Georgia, it's pretty spot on. Brian Kemp won by 7.5 points. Pretty similar to the polls. If you, yeah, so you can see in the polls, it's pretty spot on in Georgia. In Kansas, for a period, I thought the Republicans gonna win, but in the end, the polls does show the Democratic incumbent governor slightly leading, and Laura Kelly did end up winning her re-election by a lean margin of 2.2 points. I was more accurate with the governor's races than the Senate races. The Senate races just my predictions were just a disaster. Governors is a bit better. In Maine, Maine only voted for Hillary Clinton 2016 by like 3 points. Not a good margin. And Janet Mills is not very popular, and she's running against Paula Page, the former governor of Maine. So the race was naturally, I thought, it was going to be pretty narrow, but no, she won by over 13 points. So yeah, that's a pretty big overestimation of Republicans. Similarly, in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer is pretty popular, but the polls does show her only narrowly leading, and Tudor Dixon, in the end, in the Trafalgar poll, was actually leading by a point, but in the end, Gretchen Whitmer won by double digits, more than 10 points, which is also a pretty big overestimation of Republicans. In fact, the Democrats had a blue wave in Michigan. The Democrats not only won the governor's election in Michigan by over 10 points, they also took back the state house and the state senate. So Michigan now has a Democratic state trifecta. Minnesota, Tim Walz, 7.7 points, likely D, matches up pretty well with the polling averages in the end. In Nevada, even though the Democrats won in Nevada Senate election, and the Democrats had less luck in the governor's election. The current governor, Steve Sisolak, really closed down all of the casinos in Las Vegas when COVID hit, which is good for public health, but definitely bad for the economy. And people definitely resented him for that. So Joe Lombardo, the sheriff of Clark County, won by 1.5% margin, pretty narrow, but matches up, underperformed his polling averages a little bit, but yeah, lean R. That's pretty accurate. Again, my governor's elections predictions were more accurate than my Senate ones. In New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham won by 6.4 points. She is actually one of the rare instances of a Democrat having a lot of scandals, but so that's why and New Mexico isn't really that blue. They voted for Joe Biden by 10 points in 2020. So a Republican might win there, but lean D. But in the end, Lujan Grisham, the incumbent governor, won by 6.4 points, which is a slightly bigger margin than we all expected. In New York, again, the New York Democrats really screwed up in this election, and one of the few states where the Republicans saw successes. Do you believe that in New York, the Democratic governor won by less of a margin than the scandal-ridden Democratic governor in New Mexico? Like, if you told me that 4 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. But yeah, New York, the Democratic governor won by 5.7% re-election, which is barely a likely margin, almost veering towards a lean margin. Lee Zeldin really ran a pretty good campaign. In the end, the polling was pretty narrow. Kathy Hochul did end up winning, albeit by a really smaller margin than than I expected. I expected to be likely 8 to 9 points, but not like 5 point margin. Ohio, Mike DeWine, governor, pretty popular. Oklahoma is one of the few ones that I actually overestimated overestimated Democratic support, along with Florida. Yeah, going back to Florida, Ron DeSantis won by almost 20 points. Safe R. I thought it was gonna be in the lower double-digit margins, but yeah, Republicans are overperforming in Florida, and I also overestimated Democratic support in Oklahoma, because in the end, there were a lot of polls showing the Democrat Joy Hofmeister. Joy Hofmeister. Got it. Joy Hofmeister leading in the polls. I can actually show you right now. Yeah, you can see Hofmeister's actually leading in several of these polls, but in the end, Kevin Stitt did dramatically overperform his polling averages, but I guess it shouldn't be that surprising that in Oklahoma, the Republican governor won re-election by 13 points. In Oregon, the race again is pretty close for a state that's as blue as Oregon, but yeah, due to the presence of a third-party candidate on the ballot diverting the vote, we can see the Democrat did win by only 3.4 points, but it's still more than the tilt D rating I gave it. In the end, I for a period thought the Republican candidate is going to win, but in the end, the support for the independent candidate started dropping, so which gives the Democrat more of a chance to win. Moreover, the current governor, Kate Brown, is one of the most unpopular governors in the nation, so the Democrats were barely able to eke out a win in Oregon, albeit by a slightly larger margin than I expected. In Pennsylvania, it's a state that barely voted for Joe Biden in 2020, barely voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And so the governor's election, although Shapiro is a bit, Josh Shapiro is the clear favorite. I didn't think he's going to win by that much, but Doug Mastriano, which is a literal Nazi who avoided speaking with the mainstream media and didn't really run off ads, his own political views and his decision not to run ads with the mainstream media really tanked his campaign. The Democrat ended up winning. Josh Shapiro, the current attorney general, won by 15 points in a red wave year in a swing state. Yeah. Just goes to show how much candidate quality matters. Now, another one is Wisconsin. Tony Evers is pretty popular, although in the end, the Republican was able to catch up with the polling averages, and considering how in Wisconsin, Joe Biden was overestimated in 2020 by around 6 points, I thought, yeah, there's a very decent chance the Republicans will win, so much so that I gave a tilt R rating, but Tony Evers ended up winning re-election, which isn't that surprising since it's a tilt rating, but still, in the end, the polls show the Republicans leading slightly, and considering that the polls used to always overestimate Democrats, I thought the Republicans are more favored to win the race, but Democrats still won, and it's one of the ones that I got wrong. So the average bias for all of these 38 races is 0.62 points overestimation of the Republicans. However, if you take competitive races, it increases to 1.71% toward overestimation of Republicans. And again, I did better in the governor's elections than in the Senate elections, being 94.4% correct instead of 91%. And in competitive races, I got 84% correct. I was honestly surprised that I got states like Oregon and Kansas correct, which definitely helped to boost the competitive races correct for me, for my predictions, a bit under 85% compared to 72% for the Senate races. But yeah, if you look at this handy chart right here, again, Oklahoma is really the only place where I overestimated Democrats due to the erroneous polls. But in all other states, the Republicans were overestimated, and it's especially severe in Maine and Michigan, where the Democrats really outperformed their polling averages and my predictions by over 5 points at almost 10 points. Now, some of the closest House races, at least according to my predictions, and the final results. These are just a list of 50 House races I've compiled based on how close the final results are and how close the predicted results are. In a lot of them, both the actual results and the predicted results were close, and some of them it's only the actual results was close, and some of them only the predicted results were close. But the first one is Alaska at large. So Mary Peltola, in a very big upset, won Alaska's only House seat back in September in a special election by around 3 points. And she definitely has an advantage of incumbency, but Alaska's still a red state overall. And after all, there's 2 months for the Republicans to prepare for a new strategy. So only a lean Democrat, but apparently Mary Patola is a pretty popular incumbent. Turns out she won by almost double digits, not what I was expecting. And if you look at the bias column over right here, you can see there are more races that are biased toward, more elections that are biased towards Republicans, aka overestimating Republican support, than there are places that underestimated Republican support or overestimated Democratic support. So, which again shows you how well the red waves, how well the red wave went. You can see most of these, overestimated Republican support, and only a handful of these races overestimated Democratic support, and another handful of races didn't really overestimate any party. And in Arizona, it was one of the ones that overestimated Democrats. Arizona 2 and Arizona 6, due to the Republicans having a very narrow majority in the legislature, the Republicans have a one-seat majority in both of Arizona's houses of legislature. So in Arizona 6, Juan Ciscomani did win his election by a lean margin, but Arizona 2, Arizona 2nd District, it was also has a predicted margin of lean R, but he ended up winning by more than that. Similarly, in California, and it's italicized because not all votes are in yet, so this percentage could change a bit. But yeah, in California 3, a mountainous new district, also had more Republican support than expected. This is a similar story for some other races in California where the Republicans also overperformed slightly. And the Republicans even picked up a House seat in California, but I wouldn't really say it's a red wave in California, but it's a red ripple too, at least. California 13, a Republican barely won there. I expected to be a tilt R, and turns out it is, so no bias. In Colorado 3, Lauren Boebert's seat. Yeah, Lauren Boebert, arguably one of the dumbest members of Congress. Her seat, she won an election in 2020 by around 6-7 points, and in redistricting, her district was actually made more Republican in order to guarantee the Democrats in Colorado more seats, and still, her district was more Republican. She only won by 554 votes, which is a less than 0.2% margin. That is definitely a very, very big underestimation of Democratic support in Colorado 3rd District. Honestly, if the Democrat just got like 600 more votes, it could have been a Democratic victory and potentially one of the biggest upsets of this cycle. Unfortunately, the Democrat fell 554 votes short, but still, a very small and potentially concerning margin for Lauren Boebert, who next election knows that she won't be comfortably winning. Now in Colorado 8th District, it's a new district because Colorado gained the seat, and it has a partisan lean of even, but considering that it's a red wave year, it's only natural for it to assume it's going to go to the Republicans. No, the Democrats won, which is also overestimation. Connecticut 5, no, the margins matches up pretty much. In Illinois 13, it's a very, very gerrymandered district that could potentially produce a Democratic win, but I didn't expect it to be this much. Similarly, in Illinois 17th District, again, lean R, Democrats ended up winning. So, let's going over individual districts are pretty slow, so we're just gonna go over the states as a whole. In Maine, Maine 2nd District won by Trump by almost double digits. Jared Golden, the Democrat, ended up winning actually, which is pretty shocking considering it's a district that Trump won by a lot. In Michigan, huge underestimation of Democratic support. You can see on this chart, it's just going towards the left by a pretty big chunk. So Michigan, the Democrats really had a good night in Michigan. It was a red wave. Nevada. The Democrats gerrymandered it a little bit, and a lot of the Nevada districts around Las Vegas are pretty red, at least like compared to like a margin the Democrats would be comfortable with. And it's a red wave year, so I expected one of them to lose re-election. No, all 3 Democratic congressmen and women won their re-elections with overestimation of Republicans. In New Hampshire, both of these seats, we expected them to be close. No. And see, in North Carolina, Ohio, Democrats flipped 2 seats in North Carolina. Didn't really expect Don Nickel to, whatever his first name is. I don't know why I just assumed it's Don, but Nickel, Congressman Nickel, won by 3.2%. Again, really, really surprising. But I guess shouldn't be that surprised considering North Carolina actually tried to pass a gerrymandered map, but it was struck down by the state Supreme Court. And again, in Ohio, the Democrats also did really well in Ohio because the gerrymandered map in Ohio was struck down by their Supreme Court. But still, overestimation of Republicans. The Democrats also might be helped by Tim Ryan, who, although he didn't win the Senate race by himself, did potentially help these House races to go towards the Democrats. Also, some districts in Texas, I thought the South Texas around the Rio Grande River is turning more Republican in recent years, but turns out the Democrats are still able to win there by a pretty significant margin. I thought, and like, yeah, huge underestimation of Democrats. Although in Texas 15, the Republican did overperform, which is also a South Texas district. Again, where else did the Democrats overperform? Washington. One of the potentially biggest upsets of this election cycle. Mayor Glusenkamp Perez won in a likelier district. The district voted for Donald Trump in 2020 by double digits. At 538, the Democrat had a 4% chance of winning. 4%. Yet, she pulled it off. 0.8% margin of victory. Pretty close, but for a district with a likely R rating, yeah. Not expected. Washington 8, only a district with that slightly leans towards the Democrats. Democrats ended up winning there by a pretty significant margin. And in all of these competitive races, the average bias is 2 percentage points towards the Republicans, meaning a 2 percentage point overestimation of Republicans. And in these 50 most competitive races, I only got a bit less than 2/3 of them correct. Just shows how much the Democrats overperformed their polling. But this doesn't mean that the Republicans didn't have their own states. For example, Florida, due to gerrymandering, they picked up 4 seats. That doesn't really count. But the Democrats did underperform, and the Republicans did overperform in the state of New York right here. In New York, you can see a lot of these lean and tilt Democratic seats, they all ended up going towards the Republicans. Chuck Schumer only won his re-election by 12 points. Kathy Hochul only won her governor's race by 5 points, less than New Mexico's governor. All of these races that are leaning towards the Democrats ended up winning, and then almost all of them ended up won by Republicans, some of them by a pretty significant margin. The Democrats in New York, Democratic Party of New York, really screwed up in this one. If the Democrats want to continue winning in New York, they really have to get their game up. They pretty much ignored the Long Island and the districts that are in the excerpts of New York City. So yeah, New York, Florida, one of the few places where Republicans did really well, but otherwise, the Republicans, red wave they hoped for, went absolutely nowhere. Democrats picked up a seat in the Senate, which led to my predictions being pretty wrong, as you can see, and And the governor's races is the same story. Democrats picked up 2 governor's seats. But although my predictions were a bit more accurate, and yeah, in the competitive House races, the Democrats really did so well that I only predicted around 2/3 of them correctly. So yeah, were my predictions accurate? Not really, but so were the other pundits. Like, I predicted a Senate that's 52 to 48 towards the Republicans. 538 predicted to be 51 to 49. So yeah, to a certain extent, all of these pundits overestimated Republican support. But for me, because I try to adjust my predictions to past polling averages, which overestimates Democrats, I really did get more races wrong because I thought more of them are going to go to the Republicans. But due to Democrats' overperformance, yeah, it turns out my predictions were not as accurate as the other pundits. Not to say that the other prediction websites were were that much more accurate, but yeah, my predictions not the most accurate thing in the world due to Democrats overperforming. Thank you for watching this video. Probably the last politics related video I'm gonna post on the second channel in a while, so don't expect more political videos on my second channel. It's just a video that I wanted to make and upload here for whatever reason. But yeah, anyways, bye. Do not predictions were not good. Do not expect more politics content on this channel.